Good morning. To borrow a line from David Payton, I can't think of a better place in all the world to be than right here at the Lafayette Church of Christ. And how true of a statement that really is, I can understand exactly why he says that every single morning. There's actually a lot more people here that was supposed to be here this morning. A lot of people were supposed to be going to polishing the pulpit, but I do appreciate the opportunity to get to stand up here in David's absence as he and several others are gone this morning. I don't consider myself a preacher. I'm definitely not as good as David is, but I do appreciate the opportunity to get to stand up here this morning. This morning's lesson comes from a film entitled The Silencing of God by Dave Miller. If you have not had a chance to watch this film, if you get a chance to do so, you might can find it online or someone here may have a copy of it. If you have a chance to watch it, I definitely recommend doing so. Dave does an excellent job with his film. He takes several hours to take a look at so much information, the way the country started and the way the condition the country's in today. So if you have a chance, I recommend watching his lesson, and not to take completely away from his. I've taken some of his information and also put some of my own in there, and I've entitled my lesson, A Christian Nation. And you notice there that there's a question mark beside nation. And what I hope to do is figure out how the United States become known as a Christian nation and what's happened to that title today. So to start with, I want to look at a few inaugural addresses from some of our early presidents, starting with George Washington. Such being the impression under which I have in obedience to the public summons, prepared to the present station, it would be peculiarly improper to omit in this first official act my fervent supplications to that Almighty Being who rules over the universe, who presides in the councils of nations, and whose providential aids can supply every human defect, that His benediction may consecrate to the liberties and happiness of the people of the United States a government instituted by themselves for these essential purposes, and may enable every instrument employed in its administration to execute with success the functions allotted to His charge. And tendering this homage to the great author of every public and private good, I assure myself that it expresses your sentiments not less than my own, nor those of my fellow citizens at large less than either. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men more than the people of the United States. Every step by which they have advanced to the character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. Next, let's look at Thomas Jefferson. Acknowledging, adoring, and overruling providence, which by all its dispensation proves that it delights in the happiness of man and his greater happiness hereafter. With all these blessings, what more is necessary to make us a happy and prosperous people? And may that infinite power which rules the destinies of the universe lead our counsels to what is best and give them a favorable issue for your peace and prosperity. Next, let's look at Abraham Lincoln. My countrymen, one and all, think calmly and well upon this whole subject. Nothing valuable can be lost by taking time. If there be an object to hurry any of you in hot haste to a step which you would never take deliberately, that object will be frustrated by taking time. But no good object can be frustrated will be frustrated by it. Such of you as are now dissatisfied still hold the old Constitution unimpaired and, on a sensitive point, the laws of your own framing under it, while the new administration will have no immediate power, if it would, to change either. If it were admitted that you who are dissatisfied hold the right side in the dispute, there still is no single good reason for precipitate action. Intelligence, patriotism, Christianity, and a firm reliance on Him who has never yet forsaken this favored land are still competent to adjust in the best way all our present difficulty. Now, before we move on from the inaugural addresses, we have had 45 presidents in the United States of America, all the way from George Washington to our current president, Donald Trump. I have not personally read every single inaugural address, but from what I've studied, every single president and every single inaugural address has had some positive comments about God in each and every inaugural address. That's just interesting side notes that I come across there. Next, let's take a look at a Thanksgiving proclamation dated October 3rd, 1789 from George Washington. Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful to His benefits, and humbly to implore His protection and favor, Now pay attention to this next sentence that I'll read here. And whereas both houses of Congress, by their joint committee, requested me to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer, to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many and signal favors of Almighty God, especially by affording them an opportunity peaceably to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness. Now take that one sentence right there, that one paragraph that I just read, and also think back on the previous inaugural addresses that I read. There are more references to God in those short paragraphs than are in so many sermons that are being preached today. There in the second paragraph, you can see several more highlighted references to God, and there in the third paragraph, and also that we may then unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of nations, and beseech Him to pardon our national and other transgressions. Can you imagine if a president or a lawmaker or somebody in our government got up today and read a proclamation like this? Can you imagine the heat and the backlash and probably the lawsuits that would follow if somebody got up today and read something like this? It's unheard of. Let's take a look now at a few quotes from some of our previous presidents. Let me live according to those holy rules which thou hast this day prescribed in thy holy word. Direct me to the true object, Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. Bless, O Lord, all the people of this land. George Washington. The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. I will avow that I then believed and now believe that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. John Adams. We recognize no sovereign but God and no king but Jesus. John Adams. The reason that Christianity is the best friend of government is because Christianity is the only religion that changes the heart. Thomas Jefferson. I have always said and always will say that the studious perusal of the sacred volume will make better citizens, better fathers, better husbands. The Bible makes the best people in the world. Thomas Jefferson. We have forgotten God. We have forgotten the gracious hand which preserved us in peace and multiplied and enriched and strengthened us. And we have vainly imagined in that deceitfulness of our hearts that all these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own. Intoxicated with unbroken success, we have become too self-sufficient to feel the necessity in redeeming the preserving grace, too proud to pray to the God that made us. Abraham Lincoln. The only assurance of our nation's safety is to lay our foundation in morality and religion. Abraham Lincoln. The rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. John F. Kennedy. Within the covers of the Bible are the answers for all the problems men face. Ronald Reagan. And each day, millions of our citizens approach our Maker on bended knee, seeking His grace and giving thanks for the many blessings He bestows upon us. George W. Bush. Now, even though I added in 3 fairly recent presidents from there, JFK, Ronald Reagan, and George W. Bush, looking at those other quotes, looking at the proclamation, and looking at those previous inaugural addresses, I think it's pretty clear how the United States originally become known as a Christian nation, and that our founding fathers and our early presidents wanted a country based around God. Some interesting facts that I come across while preparing for this lesson. Did you know that as you walk up the steps to the building which houses the U.S. Supreme Court, you can see near the top of the building a row of the world's lawgivers, and each one of them is facing one in the middle who is facing with a full frontal view. It is Moses, and he is holding the 10 Commandments. As you enter the Supreme Court courtroom, the 2 huge oak doors have the 10 Commandments engraved on each lower portion of each door. As you sit inside the courtroom, you can see the wall right above where the Supreme Court judges sit, a display of the 10 Commandments. There are Bible verses etched in stone all over all the federal buildings in Washington. James Madison, the 4th president, known as the father of our Constitution, made the following statement: "We have staked the whole of all our political institutions upon the capacity of mankind for self-government, upon the capacity of each and all of us to govern ourselves, to control ourselves, to sustain ourselves, according to the 10 Commandments of God." Did you know that every session of Congress begins with a prayer by a paid preacher whose salary has been paid by the taxpayer since 1777? And lastly, there are 52 of the 55 founders of the Constitution were members of the established Orthodox churches in the colonies. How then have we gone from everything that we've believed in and taught for the last 200 plus years, how then have we gone from that to now that everything is suddenly wrong and unconstitutional? That brings us to the dismantling of a Christian nation. To begin with, let's take a look at some lawsuits that have taken place throughout the years. McCollum versus Board of Education, District 71, 1948. Court finds religious instruction in public schools a violation of the Establishment Clause and therefore is unconstitutional. Burston versus Wilson, 1952. Government may not censor a motion picture because it is offensive to religious beliefs. Torcaso versus Watkins, 1961. Court holds that the state of Maryland cannot require applicants for public office to swear that they believe in the existence of God. The court unanimously rules that a religious test violates the Establishment Clause. Engel versus Vitale, 1962. Any kind of prayer composed by public school districts, even non-denominational prayer, is unconstitutional government sponsorship of religion. Epperson versus Arkansas, 1968. State statute banning teaching of evolution is unconstitutional. A state cannot alter any element in a course of study in order to promote a religious viewpoint. A state's attempt to hide behind a non-religious motivation will not be given credence unless that state can show a secular reason as for the foundation of its actions. Stone versus Graham, 1980. Court finds posting of the Ten Commandments in schools unconstitutional. Allegheny County versus ACLU, 1989. Court finds that a nativity scene displayed inside a government building violates the Establishment Clause. Lee versus Wiseman, 1992. Unconstitutional for a school district to provide any clergy to perform non-denominational prayer at elementary or secondary school graduation. It involves government sponsorship of worship. Court majority was particularly concerned about psychological coercion to which children, as opposed to adults, would be subjected by having prayer that may violate their beliefs and recited at their graduation ceremonies. Most of us here are familiar with the phrase, separation from church and state. But where did we actually get that phrase? Have you ever done the research to figure out where that phrase comes from? It comes from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote on January 1st, 1802. He wrote a letter to the Danbury Baptist Association. I'm not going to read the entire letter. If you'd like a copy of it, I can get you a copy. But in this letter, Thomas Jefferson is reassuring this religious group, you've got the freedom of religion. Government cannot and will not interfere in your freedom of religion. That highlighted part there that says, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. That's where the phrase comes from. Nowhere in the Constitution, nowhere in the Bill of Rights, nowhere in any legally binding document out there can you find that the separation from church and state means you cannot have religion and government. Something so positive for religion at one time and a reassurance has been twisted and turned around today and has been used against religion ever since. The Pledge of Allegiance. Where did we get our pledge? I almost kind of hate to think that some of the younger ones don't even know what the pledge is today. When we were in school, we recited it for the first few years I was in school, but now I don't think they even recite it anymore. But where did we get our pledge? The Pledge of Allegiance was written in August of 1892 by the socialist minister, Francis Bellamy. It was originally published in the Youth's Companion on September 8, 1892. Bellamy had hoped that the pledge would be used by citizens in any country. In its original form, the pledge read, I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In 1923, the words, the flag of the United States of America were added. At this time it read, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What two words are missing out of the pledge that we have today? The words under God. When were these words added to our pledge? In 1954, in response to the communist threats of the times, President Eisenhower encouraged Congress to add the words "under God," creating the 31-word pledge that we have today. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's a shame that as recent as 1954, when you think of 1954, you want to say that's been a long time ago, but in the whole grand scheme of things, that's not been that many years ago that our Congress and President added the words "under God" to our pledge. And now these are the very two words that people are trying to take out of it today. There's a song out there called "In God We Still Trust" by Diamond Rio. Many of you may have heard this song, some of you may not have, but pay attention to the lyrics of this song as I read these. You place your hand on His Bible when you swear to tell the truth. His name is on our greatest monuments and all our money too. And when we pledge allegiance, there's no doubt where we stand. There is no separation. We're one nation under Him. In God we still trust. Here in America, He's the one we turn to every time the going gets rough. He is the source of all our strength, the one who watches over us. Here in America, in God we still trust. Now there are those among us who want to push Him out and erase His name from everything His country's all about. From the schoolhouse to the courthouse, they're silencing His word. Now it's time for all believers to make our voices heard. In God we still trust. Here in America, He's the one we turn to every time the going gets rough. He is the source of all our strength, the one who watches over us. Here in America, in God we still trust. Now, for those of you that have heard this song, chances are even fewer of you have heard it on the radio. And if you have heard it on the radio, chances are even fewer of you have recently, and you most likely won't for long. This song has been banned across every radio station across the country because it is politically incorrect. So who's to blame? Who's to blame for the current condition that our country's in today? Think back for just a moment on the last time you were watching Fox News or CNN or whatever your favorite news channel is. Think back on the last time you were in your vehicle, riding to work, coming home, listening to the radio. Think back on the last court case you heard where another religious activity got shot down. Think back on the last time the president made a law that basically further kicked God out of this country. Think back on the last state that made another pro-abortion law, or the last lawsuit that come about because of prayer in school or in a courtroom or what have you. What did we do? What did we do when we heard of those type cases? Do we just kind of lower our heads and think, my, what in the world is this country coming to? What are our lawmakers in Washington doing today? Do we say, I sure am glad I didn't vote for that guy. I'm glad the day I went to vote, I voted for somebody else. It's not my fault. I voted for somebody else. I think most all of us are guilty of that statement right there. Think back on the last time you were watching TV with your kids or your family or in a group of friends. Look at the trash that's on TV today. Think back on those shows and the teenagers in those shows. Those teenagers have no respect for their family or their parents. Their parents have no respect for them. All any of them do is backtalk each other, cut each other down the entire show, but the audience is sitting there laughing the entire time. What do we do when we see these shows? Do we sit there and in the back of our minds just think, what in the world is Hollywood putting on our TV today and subjecting our children to? But we continue to sit there and watch it nonetheless. Many of us are familiar with the shows such as Andy Griffith and those shows of that time frame, even a little newer shows like The Brady Bunch or Full House, those type shows. TV used to be more of a family-friendly environment. You didn't have to worry about sitting down with your family and what was on TV or what was going to be said. But think back on those type shows. I cannot think of a single cuss word in any of those shows. But as time goes on, Hollywood continues to slip more and more cuss words and more sin, period, into our shows. But as you notice, as time also goes on, they they take away more and more clothes from these individuals. So back to my original question, who's to blame? Who's to blame for the condition our country is in today? Hollywood has a big role to play in it. They have such an influence on all of our lives, especially our children. The media has another big role to play in it. They are, just like Hollywood, they're very influential on all of us. They like for us to lean the way that they want us to lean. Our lawmakers are to blame. They are elected by the people and put in office to uphold the Constitution and also uphold our beliefs and our values. And they might do so for a little while, but as they get in there and stay in longer and longer, politics kicks in and money starts getting thrown at them, and they soon forget who actually put them there. Unfortunately, they are not the only ones that we can blame. We as Christians, we as God's people are as much to blame for the demise of this country than any liberal politician out there today. And you say, well, Chad, how in the world can you stand there and blame me? How can you say that I, a Christian, am as much to blame for this country's demise? Because we as Christians, we as God's people are too ashamed to stand up for what we believe in. We are too ashamed and too afraid to stand up against the crowd and fight for God. We continue to take the back seat to these atheists and organizations such as the ACLU, and we continue to sit back and watch God being kicked out of this country. I'm not at all condoning the things that the ACLU and other organizations do, but unfortunately we've got to hand it to them. They're out there each and every day fighting for what they believe in. It may not be right, but they're fighting for what they believe in, and what's even worse, they're winning. Unfortunately, that's much more than what we can say today. And I know that we are working people. I know we have jobs. We can't be in court all day. We can't be at the picket lines each and every day, but we can do more than sitting at home watching this country go down the drain. You say, well, Chad, I'm just one person. How can one person make a difference? Who's going to listen to me from Lafayette, Georgia, or Summerville, Georgia? How can I change anything? You want examples of people that have accomplished a lot of things in their lifetimes? These may not be the best religious examples, all of them, but these are examples of people that have accomplished a lot of things in their lives, good or bad. Take a look at Abraham Lincoln, the president responsible for abolishing slavery in this country. The man that stood up against something that was popular at the time. He stood up for what he believed in, he fought for what he believed in, and he died for what he believed in. One person. Take a look at Martin Luther King Jr., same thing. A man that had such a huge following behind him and believed the same thing that he believed in, again, fought for what he believed in and died for what he believed in. One person. You want biblical examples? Look at Noah. God came to Noah and said, Noah, I want you to build this ark. And I want you to build it exactly how I tell you to build it. And if you do so, when I bring the rain upon this earth, I will spare you and your family. And you've got to think at this time, it never rained upon the earth. They didn't know what rain was. But the trust and the faith that Noah had in God, he said, okay, whatever you say, I'll do it. Through the criticism, the ridicule, and the years of building this ark, Noah did exactly as God wanted him to, built it exactly the way he told him to do it. And when the rains came, God spared him and his family. One person. Look at Moses. Look at Paul, the chief of sinners. Most important, look at Jesus, the man that was sent to this earth and lived a short life and suffered a cruel, cruel, agonizing, painful death so that one day you and I could have a home in heaven. One person. Think about the Lafayette Church of Christ. You've got to realize the church hasn't always been here in Lafayette. I think we're just a little over 100-something years old here, and at some time down the road, somebody had to have the idea in their mind, I want to build a building right here and plant the seed right here in Lafayette, Georgia. That idea spread to another person, another, and another, and at some point down the road, they built a building, and the seed was planted, and now look at where we are today. We're in a different building, and look at where we are in number and in truth because of one person. You want examples of people that have accomplished a lot of bad things in their lifetime? Look at Adolf Hitler, the man responsible for murdering countless individuals because of what they believed in. Someone that most all of us in here can probably relate to a little more. Look at Osama bin Laden. It's been almost 16 years since September 11th, 2001. 16 years ago, I was a freshman in high school, walking down the hallways, looked in a classroom that had a TV on, and there was one of the Twin Towers burning. At the time, I just thought it was burning. I didn't know exactly what happened, but as the day went on, we went from class to class watching those towers burn. One of the last classes we had of the day, the teacher sat us down and said, "Men, we're at war." And we didn't know what war was. We didn't understand why we were at war, who we were going to war with, or exactly what was going on, but he was right. But 16 years ago, September 11th, 2001, because of one person, hundreds and thousands of lives, souls, were lost that day. On that fateful day, mothers, fathers, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, grandparents lost their souls that day because of one person. Don't tell me one person can't make a difference. Don't tell me one person can't change history. One person can change the world. It's been proven time and time again. We as one person have more power than what any of us realize and that we know what to do with. One more thing this morning, and the lesson will be yours. I've got a challenge for every one of us here. I've got a list here, and as you walk through the double doors, that table to the left, there's a stack of lists. And it's contact information for our President, Donald Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, the U.S. Senators from Georgia, David Perdue and Johnny Isakson, and the Representative from Georgia, Tom Graves. I want us to write a letter. You can write one letter and change the name and send it to all these people. You can reference the silencing of God. You can reference this sermon. You can express your concerns about this country. You can write whatever you want to in this letter. But I want us to write a letter, and I want us to send it to everybody on this list. And then take this list and pass it on to somebody else that has not had this challenge yet. Keep that challenge going. Give them the list, have them write a letter, and then have them send the list to somebody else as well. You may say, "Well, Chad, this is a silly waste of a time of a challenge. Nobody's going to listen to this." And maybe you're right. But I can almost guarantee us that it's more than any of us have been doing. Don't forget that Roe versus Wade happened because of one person. We no longer have prayers in schools because of one person. We no longer have the Bible as a textbook in our schools because of one person. Let today be the day that you no longer sit there and say, "God, I love you, and I want to go to heaven, but I can't fight for you. I can't stop what I'm doing day to day and write one letter. Nobody's going to listen to me. I can't do it." Let today be the day that you sit there and say, "God, I love you. I want to go to heaven, and I'm going to do every single thing I can in my power to prove to you that I want to go to heaven." Don't let another opportunity pass us by when we could actually make a difference. This morning, if you feel that you're subject to the invitation, if you've got any sin in your life whatsoever, if there's anything at all that you need, we've got a room full of people here that's ready to wrap their arms around you and tell you it's going to be okay and tell you they love you and tell you that we're here for you. If you're not yet a Christian, if you know the steps of becoming a Christian, you're ready and willing to take those steps, and there's no better time than now to take care of that as well. We've got the baptistry ready. We can baptize you right now for the forgiveness and the remission of your sins. Whatever your need may be, won't you come? Well, as together we stand and as we sing.